Hey guys, welcome back to another video. We're going to be covering Betta Fish care again and some sort of general myths and inaccurate information about them. So hopefully this gives you a bit of a better idea of how to care for your fish if you are preparing to get one in the future. So basically, Betta Fish can live happy and healthy lives. Most of the time, they don't reach as long a lifespan as they could, but it has been known for them to reach lifespans of like 8 to 10 years, even though the average is only about 2 to 4. But a lot of times people will get bettas from pet stores and they'll get the incorrect information, and their Betta Fish just doesn't live as long as it should have or could have. So hopefully this video will help you kind of correct some of that information. Don't forget to subscribe if you have already. We do a lot of other videos, and yeah, join the Kookiee crew. A good size for Betta Fish tanks is about 5 gallons on their own. The minimum people say is usually 2.5. Personally, I wouldn't want to get anything less than a 5-gallon tank for my Betta Fish. They can be incredibly active and inquisitive fish once they're actually comfortable and settled into their home. The amount of times my own Betta Fish like climbed under the moss at the driftwood like to get himself stuck and then would wiggle his way back out to repeat the process over and over. It was actually very interesting to see. They are such inquisitive little creatures, and they really do deserve the space to move around. Even if they have got massive fins, you really don't understand how big a personality these guys can have until you give them the space to show it. So personally, I would recommend a 5-gallon tank for a Betta Fish, but a lot of people do say the minimum is 2.5. You can use a 2.5 tank, that is perfectly fine. It just comes down to preference. Anything smaller than that, I would not recommend at all. That is just bordering on lines of cruel, in my opinion. So do not get anything smaller than a 2.5-gallon tank minimum. Ignore all the little bowls that they tell you in the fish shops, the little teeny circular bowls. Just don't do it. It's like you living in a cupboard for your whole life. Just imagine you being in a cupboard. You can walk like 2 steps and then you have to turn around. Just no. Okay, just don't do it. It's not fair on the fish. You're gonna have a short-lived fish. You're gonna have to spend more money getting more fish. Just don't do it. 2.5 minimum. 5 is perfectly great in my opinion. I would get a 5. My own Betta Fish had a 15-gallon to himself, and it was actually really amazing. Another massive myth that comes with Betta Fish is they don't need a heater or a filter. This is completely inaccurate. Yes, they do. They're a tropical fish. They need warm temperatures and they need a filter to clean the water. I can't stress this enough, how many people are told that their Betta Fishes, oh, they live in puddles in the wild, they don't need filters and they don't need heaters. This is completely inaccurate. Yes, they do. This is simply because in the wild they live in shallower water naturally, in like wetlands, but the difference is these wetlands stretch for miles and miles and miles. The actual mass of water is a lot bigger than the tank that you have them in. It's a lot bigger. Okay, imagine a little 5-gallon tank, this big, imagine a shallow river stretching for literally miles. There's kind of a big difference in water volume. So yes, they might not have like filters in the wild, but they don't really need it because they have such a large volume of water that the water gets naturally filtered by all the plants around it. It's an ecosystem, it's a balance, that's how it works. That doesn't mean they don't need it in captivity. That's like saying, you don't need to give your cat water because it doesn't get given water in the wild. It's completely inaccurate. It's not how it goes in captivity. You need to provide what they don't have in the wild, and they need heaters and they need filtration. Another reason why this comes about is because in the dry season, the myth of them living in puddles in nature, so it's fine if they don't have a filter, is wrong. In the wild, in the dry season, yes, their rivers do begin to dry up, and a lot of Betta Fish are stranded in puddles, muddy puddles, so to speak. But what people don't understand is this is also when a lot of Betta Fish die in the wild. They will literally jump from puddle to puddle in an attempt to escape and find a larger puddle. So many of them die. It's the dry season. It's a stressful period for them. It isn't their perfect conditions, and it isn't what we should be replicating in captivity, because they will be stressed and they will probably die essentially. It's not good for them. It's such a bad myth. I don't know why people decided to take the worst conditions that they have to fight through in the wild as the base conditions for them to have in captivity. It's completely inaccurate. So many of them die in the dry season simply because a puddle is not enough space for a fish to thrive. You're just needlessly stressing them out by replicating those conditions in captivity. It's completely cruel. And just think of it also in this way, essentially. Imagine you're in a bathtub and you go to the toilet or whatever, but it doesn't get cleaned up. So, and your head's underwater, so you're essentially breathing in your own That is what happens in a fish tank if you don't have a filter, because the whole point of a filter is it breaks down things like fish waste with the bacteria inside of the filter and the medium and everything. You don't want your fish swimming in its own waste. No. I don't understand how people... It's fine though, I understand. A lot of misinformation is given and people simply just aren't aware of it, but just think of it as swimming in your own waste, and you can see why I stress how much you need a filter for your fish tank, for every fish tank. Unless you have a very, very delicate balance of plants to fish, which is very difficult to maintain unless you really know what you're doing, not having a filtration or biomedia or any of the cycling in your tank is just asking for your fish to die a really painful death, because they will essentially burn from the inside out. They're breathing in ammonia. It's not fun, and I can't stress this enough. It's just don't do it. They also require a heater because basically where they come from, the water can reach 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I certainly don't live in an area that can hit those temperatures, and they need the higher temperatures to be happy. The colder they are, the lower their metabolism is, the more it will stress out their body, and the more susceptible they will be to diseases and everything else. Low temperatures is very known for causing constipation in betta fish because it slows down their metabolism and their body isn't able to process the food as quickly as it should, and it just basically will build up inside their system. And constipation, I did a video on this actually, is a very common cause for death in betta fish as well. So you just need to make sure you have a filter. You need to make sure you have a heater and a filter for your fish tank. It's the basic necessities. You need just basic necessities. If you're not going to get a heater and you're not going to get a filter, please just don't buy a fish tank. It's just no. Now, in terms of decoration for a betta fish, pretty much anything you want to use can be used as long as it's clean and free of chemicals. You can use fake plants, you can use real plants, you can use small pebbles, you can use large pebbles, you can use sand. It's basically down to personal preference. The only thing I would say is try to get things that are not necessarily sharp. So if you're going to go for fake plants, try and aim for silk. Because they do have very large fins that are very delicate, and they could be a little bit clumsy because of this, and you just don't want to see their fins getting damaged by scratching it on things. It's also necessarily going to cause them any harm, but if you want them to stay looking really pretty and happy and healthy, it just comes down to your personal preference of decor. They don't have any immediate needs that I'm aware of when it comes to decor. Just be careful that you're not picking anything too sharp, because, you don't want them to get tattered fins, because they can be very clumsy and they like to go under, over and through everything. They're very inquisitive little creatures. So it's just down to personal preference. They're not particularly fussy about the substrate. They're usually swimming in the middle region anyway, although they will go literally all over the tank. So that's just personal preference. A varied diet obviously does work very well for bettas. They are quite carnivorous creatures. They eat a lot of creatures like Daphnia and bloodworm and brine shrimp. Try not to overfeed them though, because betta fish are gluttons. They will eat and eat and eat until they kill themselves. Their stomachs are about the same size as their eyeballs, so try to only feed basically that amount of food. Basically, you feed them little and often. It's better to give them small amounts of food multiple times a day than one large feeding, simply because, as I said, constipation is so common in betta fish that it's just, you want to try and minimize that as much as possible. If they eat it in 5 minutes, then just leave it. Try not to keep feeding them, because they will just eat themselves to death. You have to be very mindful. Going a day without feeding them will not kill them. If anything, it's beneficial to skip a day of feeding, just because it helps clean out their system. But again, I did do a bit of a video about this in constipation, so I can just link it in the bottom. I don't need to really go over it now. Another thing to bear in mind, betta fish are exceedingly territorial. They will kill each other if you put them in a tank together. I have heard of sorority tanks working, where you just have a bunch of female bettas, but again, they're very flimsy at best, and I've heard them not work more often than I have. If you're going to have a Betta Fish, please have one per tank. They can work in community tanks perfectly fine, but you have to be mindful of fish that have similar fins to them. So maybe guppies, they will probably get mercilessly chased. Anything with large flowing fins, the Betta can associate with its own species and it just won't go well. You also need to watch out for fin nippers. Some tetras and other species can be very nippy, and you don't want them to shred your Betta's fins. Personally, if I was going to have a Betta, I would keep it in a tank by itself, just because I would feel more comfortable that it's not going to cause harm to anything and none of the other fish are going to cause harm to my Betta. And you also have to bear in mind, the more fish you buy, the bigger the tank you need. You can't really fit many fish in a 5 gallon or a 2.5 gallon except the Betta itself. Personally, that's just adding too much to the mix. If you're going to add a community tank with your Betta Fish, I would recommend 15 gallons. That gives you a nice coverage of some good species to add as well. Even bigger, 30 gallons is probably the best I would recommend. 30 gallons is a really nice size for a community tank. Your Betta Fish would be a great addition to it, but I would just be very mindful of what you put in the tank. Personally, I would keep them on their own in a 5 or a 10 gallon, but that's just me. Just do not put two together. They will kill each other. Males will kill each other. Females might not kill each other, but they will bully each other mercilessly. And, you know, bullying will cause stress, and stress will eventually kill it. So just, regardless, male or female, keep them on their own. You can't, it's not even very good to keep them together, like 2 males to a male. A lot of people say it can work. I personally haven't seen it work. I don't know anyone that's gotten it to work. So it just comes down to, your fish will be happier by themselves. Don't try and buy more, and don't let anyone talk you into buying more. They will die. They will kill each other. I've seen it happen. It's brutal. It is brutal. Just, they are not a species that likes their own species. Yes, I know, another myth, but they live together in the wild, so it's fine. They live in rivers that are miles long, okay? They have space to get away from each other. If you have 2 Betta Fish in a fish tank, the one that's being bullied has nowhere to go. They have nowhere to get away from each other. They have nowhere to stake out their territory, and it will just lead to death. Captivity is a very different environment to the wild, and you have to adapt to the differences, or you're going to have issues. The captivity is not big enough to have more than one, unless you have a ridiculously large tank. Even a 50-gallon tank, I don't think is big enough for 2 Betta Fish. They are that brutal to each other. Just stick with one, trust me. And along with every other tank, your Betta Fish will need water changes on a weekly basis. 25% to 50% water changes. That's a good way to just help clear out extra, gunk that's in the tank or the substrate. That's pretty much it. All the basics that I covered is pretty much the basics for every fish tank. Every tank needs a heater. Every tank needs a filter. Every tank needs varied diet. It's just, it really upsets me when there's so many bad information about Betta Fish out there for some reason, that we really need to try and debunk it. And I hope this video helped. If anyone is planning on getting one in the future, let me know what your favorite type of Betta Fish is. Mine personally is a half moon, because I'm a sucker for those big fins. I'm a sucker for those big fins. It's beautiful. That's my favorite. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. I stream a bunch of games, including Ark and Minecraft. I breed lots of animals. I'm a bit of a crazy person. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!